by for Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors with your host, Drew Kirby.
Hey, this is Luke Combs.
I am Morgan Wallen.
I'm Riley Green.
I'm Travis Denning.
Hey, I'm Aaron Lewis.
Hey, it's Luke Bryan.
I'm Tim McGraw.
What's up? This is Ian Munsick.
Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors. Another great week. And Janet, we are right in the thick of summer, and summer things are happening all over Wyoming. And one of those things is the second chance draw that just got finished.
Yeah, it is crazy how fast time flies, and we say this every week. And, you know, here we are in the middle of fishing season. We're all out enjoying the warm weather and water, and boom, this hits us in the face that in just a month or so, we'll be on the landscape looking at hunts across the state.
Yeah, you know, we had talked at the end of May about, you know, the closing period for applications. And then at the end of June, it was the second chance closing of applications. And now anything that's left is just over the counter, or, you know, you go into Game and Fish and get it there. But there's a new type of license this year that I think we want to highlight a little bit today. And we're bringing in Justin Benfit to get this done.
That's right. And I just want to clarify, it's not necessarily a new license. It is a type 8 license that has been used in whitetail deer before. But now we're taking it one step further, and we're going to offer it for elk. So now elk licenses have a type 8 or an unlimited, you know, harvest type license that's out there.
And so we'll say a new category of the type 8.
There you go. We'll say that.
Well, Justin, we appreciate you coming in, and I know that you have bumped up and you have gone higher in the Game and Fish departments, and you're really a busy guy now, and we appreciate you taking a little time and spending it with us, you know, low men on the totem pole.
You know, Drew, I'll always make time for the little people in my life. You know, I appreciate that. Coming from a guy that's 5'6", you know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I hear you.
So, no, thanks for having me, Drew. Happy to help.
Now, when we get into the type 8, like Janet said, this has been around for a little while in whitetail, but now it's with elk. And how will this benefit hunters in the 2024 season?
The whole goal of the type 8s is really kind of to benefit everybody. So it's kind of uncharted waters from us from an elk management standpoint. Like Janet said, we had something similar with whitetails in a few areas in the past, but this is even an evolution of that. So what we have is we have these type 8 licenses that are unlimited in nature. So we have them for select areas. There's 6 areas in eastern Wyoming where we have them. And they're unlimited for each area. So those licenses are valid just in the specific area they're issued. But not only are they unlimited in number that we will issue, they're also unlimited in the number that people can have. And so the entire goal behind all this is just really to provide another tool in the toolbox for landowners to try to help us manage over objective elk populations. So it's really an elk management thing is what it boils down to.
So for this type 8 to be put into fruition, how out of whack are the numbers in elk right now? I mean, is it just an ungodly amount of elk we have?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on your perspective, but it is fair to say that, you know, in a lot of central and eastern Wyoming, our elk herds are pretty much all over the established objectives, which is the target goal, the number of elk that we want to manage for that is approved by our commission. And so for each herd, there's a set number of elk that we try to manage for. And in all those herds in central and eastern Wyoming, we've pretty much exceeded that. Now, there's reasons for that. There's been some issues with just growing and expanding elk numbers in a lot of places that didn't used to have elk. There's some access issues that really drive a lot of it. So there's certainly reasons for it.
While this license is a super fantastic option, a good solution that we're trying, we still want people to understand that, these can come along. Some of these licenses come along with a caveat that maybe they have to be used on private land or off national forest. So before you run out and purchase these licenses, make sure that you do have access secured. It's no different than a lot of our over-the-counter licenses towards the end of the year that everyone's like, woohoo, look at all these antelope licenses. And they purchase it, and then they go out and recognize like, oh, this is all private land. I don't have access. Where can I harvest an animal? And so make sure that you are aware of those, different constraints that are on each license as you get ready in those 6 areas to purchase those.
So another part I want to focus on a little bit is when you say I can go to a place and I can have unlimited refills on my drink. That means I can go back to the fountain and get as much as I want anytime I go. So when we say unlimited number of type 8 elk licenses, does that mean I can buy one and I can go back and get as many elk as I want? Or does that mean I can go get as many of the licenses as I want?
It means as many as licenses as you want. So it's still one license per elk. So it's still a regular elk license from that perspective. Each license has a carcass coupon and that sort of thing. You can just purchase as many as you want.
And to clarify, these are cow-calf elk licenses. So they do not have any antlers. They are just cow-calf licenses only. And
so, Drew, a little bit more background on this is, this didn't happen overnight. So these elk objectives, or these elk populations, have been growing at a pretty good clip for the last 30 years or so. And so there's an awful lot of, in pretty much every case, for literally my entire career, we have responded with a dramatic liberalization of elk hunting opportunities all over central and eastern Wyoming. And so, for example, when I first moved to Douglas, there was 2.5 months of season and 2,200 tags in the Laramie Peak herd. 10 years later, we had 5,800 licenses and we were hunting elk from mid-August to the end of January. So we've responded for a long, long time with liberalizing seasons and trying to bring these herds back down toward objective. But in some cases, just kind of based on the changing nature of access in the state, with more and more folks buying properties in elk country that either want elk there, they bought them for hunting, access has just changed just for various reasons. It's just been tough for us to get an adequate number of elk harvested in order to meet our population objective goals. And so we've responded with some other management techniques, such as these Chapter 34 auxiliary seasons that we've talked about. We've just experimented around with all kinds of different license types, and this Type 8 thing is just one more tool in the toolbox. So it's another thing to provide a maximum amount of flexibility for those landowners to hopefully get hunters on there to help us manage those elk.
Justin, have you seen any pushback from hunters or landowners on this Type 8?
Well, we've had an awful lot of support in the ag community for this, just given the management flexibility that it provides. But Janet is exactly right. The hardships that some of our ag producer friends deal with too many elk are very, very much real. When you have 600 elk on a third cutting of alfalfa that can really take a lot of it out in a pretty short amount of time, that's a real hardship and a financial hit to those landowners. So it's been really well embraced in the agricultural community. It's something worth trying. It's certainly fair to say that there has been some concern from hunters that it's going to allow unregulated take and it potentially change, access onto places that they may have had before. We'll kind of, that'll all remain to be seen. But Janet also pointed out, and it's worth reiterating, that in every case, these licenses are either valid only on private land or they're valid off national forest in a couple areas. In both of those areas, like areas 6 and 7, there are a few chunks of state and BLM land they will be allowed, but the bulk of the area and where the elk are, these licenses will not be available. So it's meant to just target those elk on private lands. So hunters should not be going down to the hardware store, the license selling agent, or Game and Fish and pick up a bunch of these licenses without having access lined up ahead of time.
Are you seeing a lot of ranchers that will be using these more, like offering up to other people? Yeah, you can come on my land and take a cow elk because we have these offered now, kind of as an outfitting option for these ranchers?
Yeah, I mean, it's both. I mean, there's certainly some that there's certainly going to be some places where outfitters take advantage of the opportunities that are there. There's lots of landowners that still allow a lot of public access for harvest of cow elk. So yeah, I mean that, and that's really nothing new. That's been in place for a long time. I think it's still fair to say also, though, that some of those landowners also kind of fill up with hunters, and they can only take so many. And so I don't want folks to go out there and expecting that all of a sudden there's going to be a lot more access than there has been in recent past. So it's really going to depend on the landowner.
For a random hunter, what is the best way to approach a landowner and request or ask for access? What's the best way to go around that situation?
Well, it's just a little bit trickier than it used to be. Years ago we used to have landowner lists that we would give out and phone numbers we would give out, and folks could call and make arrangements. But those days are gone. Excuse me, Drew. Those days are gone. But really kind of just knocking on doors, getting to meet folks is the best way. And really, I mean, I think the thing that I would encourage folks the most is if you do go talk to landowners, you might talk to them and see also what you can do to maybe help them out with their situation. I mean, sometimes it means a lot if you can go visit with a landowner and offer to go help fix fence for a day or do some cow work or something like that kind of shows that you're a little bit invested in the opportunity as well. So, but it's tough. There's so many hunters out now, and access it's just a little bit different. So gone are the days when we have lists that we can just send hunters to.
Right. And with the new technology of like Onyx and things like that, I mean, that gives you the in by giving you names and everything. I assume that's probably the best way to go about your research anyway.
If you are able to secure access on some places, just treat those properties with the ultimate respect, like you would treat your own property. And those landowners, certainly the vast majority of hunters are really, really good people, and those landowners will remember you and want to welcome you back. Versus, every now and then you do get an unscrupulous individual, and landowners don't forget that. And so, if you can make a good impression, that also helps in terms of being welcomed back in future years.
And just a couple more things to clarify, Drew, some of the questions that I've been getting on these Type 8 licenses. So typically within a normal draw session, you have like a 3 license limit, typically within the way our structure is set up. And so this does allow for more access for more license purchases. So people need to recognize that. So this is above and beyond the 3 that you can normally purchase. And so just everyone needs to recognize that. But one of the caveats that has come with these licenses is typically with the National Elk Refuge, which is the refuge that is outside of Jackson. It is not operated by the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, but by other entities. And you are not allowed to use Type 8 licenses on the National Elk Refuge. So oftentimes those folks that have limited general or have leftover, have a license that has not been filled, that is limited quota or a leftover license, can go to the National Elk Refuge to harvest an elk. these type 8 licenses do not work. So even if I have an area 7 type 8, I cannot go to the National Elk Refuge to use it. But if I had an area 7 type 1 that I was not able to fill, I could go to the Elk Refuge at the end of the year to fill it.
To clarify, area 7 type 1, okay to go to the refuge. Type 8, not okay.
Not okay. So none of the type 8s across the state will work on the refuge.
What all areas? You said there were 6 areas that were in the type 8 option.
So we have them in Hunt Area 3, which is our Rawhide area. That's that country, touring all east of I-25. We have them in Area 6, Area 7, Area 126, 129, and 117.
If you have questions, which, like most issues, you do have questions, contact Game and Fish. Go to wgfd.wyo.gov, find the area that you want to hunt in, and ask questions. That's the best way to get the best answer, is asking Game and Fish.
Absolutely.
100%.
All right, Justin, Janet, we appreciate it, and we look forward to elk season. I'm stoked.
Good luck this fall, Drew. I'm rooting for you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
It's Drew, along with Brian Woodward from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. And, Brian, I'm telling you, the heat is on.
Oh, yeah. It was a rough week at the rodeo.
Yeah, it was. Of course, rodeo in town, and you did some fishing at Glendo, and then you were at, where was it, Alcova, I believe?
Yep, Alcova.
And how hot was it there? Was it, because Alcova's a little bit cooler than Casper, isn't it?
Yeah, and we had, afternoon thunderstorms roll through, so we got a little reprieve of the heat with some cloud cover and some rain coming through, but yeah, it was still warm.
But luckily you had your rain gear.
Well, it was hot enough I didn't need it. we just
felt good,
yeah,
huh?
It just felt good, and you wear that performance gear, like that striker stuff we've got. It dries off real fast, so yeah, it was nice.
And it's really nice this time of year because we've talked about it a lot. Even when it's 99 in the afternoon, in the morning time it's a little bit chilly, especially you're cruising on the boat. So to have some of the wicking apparel is always good.
Yeah. The other thing, I tend to wear like the I guess Columbia, makes a nice fishing pant, and Striker does too. Those kind of things, and they're so lightweight, that it's no different than wearing a pair of shorts. But this time of year, we got lots of bug hatches, we got a lot of mosquitoes and that kind of stuff, and so being able to keep those bugs off you, and then having a nice long sleeve, real performance, cooling shirt is super nice to have.
Yeah, I was at a baseball game last week, and I felt like the mosquitoes were going to carry me off.
Yeah,
because there were so many and so big. But luckily, I was able to have some bug spray and some long sleeve stuff. But
you can't just take a bug assault to those games. I mean, they can't. No weapons.
They frown on
weapons.
that. I don't get it. I just don't get it. But I do know that we've passed 4th of July. That means that we're thinking about elk season already.
Oh, I know. It's. Everybody's got their tags. We've got tons of guys in here. Tuning up their bows, buying new bows, getting new arrows, getting those all sighted in. We've got some guys, upgrading their sights. We've got some new Ultra View sights that have been kind of the talk of the town, and we got Evan behind the counter, and he's getting guys ready, and the guys are excited.
It's weird to me that it's this point of the year already. I mean, this year's flown by.
Every year does. I don't, you just go from one season to the next, and next season to the next, and it's crazy.
Well, I'm sorry to say this, but we'll be goose hunting before we know it.
I know, yeah, and I think they came out with the dates on that, and I kind of briefly looked at them, but I don't want to say exactly what those dates are. But yeah, I mean, although I love goose hunting, I don't necessarily like the wind and the snow as much anymore, but at the same time, it gives us something to do in the winter.
So we did have the second chance draw, and now everything is over the counter. Are those available yet, or is it closer to the season that they become?
No, I think actually yesterday they shut down the Game and Fish website so they could upload all of the leftover tags. So they're either available today or tomorrow.
Okay.
So yeah. So guys will be able to get on there and see if there's any leftovers in the areas that they want.
And one of the things that people need to be aware of, and you guys have maps of all the areas and stuff in here, but I've known some people that have been applying for licenses and tags that they can't get to because of different scenarios, like, private land and things. So people really need to, pay attention before they come in to buy those.
Yeah, the BLM map's great. Just even a regular road atlas helps with identifying the boundaries of your hunt area. And then really between the Garmin and Onyx hunt maps, that the Onyx hunt map, it seems to 90% of the guys in the field are using some form of that Onyx to identify that public and private stretches.
Yeah, and make sure, because that's a big deal when you're crossing over that public-private land line, so...
Yeah, obviously nobody really wants to do that, and I think we all want to be as legal as possible. But I think we all know that fence lines aren't always in the right spots either. So and there are a lot of times there's signs put up that says that there's no trespassing or private property, and those signs aren't always right either.
Yeah, and people like to be be tricky, those tricky little suckers. Yeah. But it happens. It does happen. Sure. Lots of things as you're getting ready to gear up for hunting season. We've been talking the last couple of years about the GPS systems, especially if you're going back into the deep country to get something like that for safety. Yeah,
we've kind of been talking about just always prepping for your upcoming season and stuff, and we talked, I think, the last couple of shows about now's the time to purchase your new gun or new optics, and if you want to put it on layaway and make payments so that it's taken care of before hunting season. But now's a great time for things like the GPSs or the hunting packs. We've got all the Mystery Ranch packs just hit. We've got the Glacier Stone Glacier packs are all in. So some of that stuff that's that upper end higher quality stuff that is a $300 or $400 investment. If you want to do $50 a month, now's the time to get that going.
And boots are another thing like that. It's time to start breaking in new boots,
right?
Because they're depending on the boot. There's certain mileage that you need to put on them before you even get out and use them.
Yeah, there's a few boot manufacturers that say there's a 50-mile break-in on this. Which you're like, 50 miles in a car is not too bad, but 50 miles on foot, that might take a bit of time.
Yeah, I don't know how many guys go out and just walk, like 3 or 4 miles a day, but that's still weeks.
Right. I know I've seen some guys in my neighborhood, and they're walking with their dogs, usually in the early mornings or evenings, and they've got their hunting pack on their back, and I don't know if I guess I haven't watched their feet, but whether they're breaking in a new set of boots or just trying to get a little cardio in before the season starts.
Well, I guarantee you that you're going to find everything that you need here at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. Make sure you come in and get everything for hunting season. And, of course, the smokers. You guys have a great Traeger display out here and a whole mess of different grills.
Yeah, when it's so hot outside and maybe even a little warm in the house, you don't want to start that oven and start doing that. So, even Papa Murphy's Take and Bake Pizzas works awesome in the Traeger, and if you're home on a weekend doing a bunch of honeydews, just plan ahead, get yourself a stack of ribs and a brisket and throw it in there while you're doing the rest of your chores.
And if you're thinking college football, because that'll be here before long, if you head down to Laramie, you've got the tailgater grills and smokers as well. Right. And that's just not something you can buy and take out and use if you've never done it before. You've got to kind of use it in practice. You don't want to be the laughing stock at the tailgate party.
Yeah, most of these grills make an average guy look pretty good, though. It's hard to ruin food on these Traegers. So, get out there and put some time behind them.
We were in here the other day and had to pick up a pop-up tent for the radio station, and we didn't walk out with just the pop-up. The guy I was with brought out like 4 or 5 different seasonings. So, you get everything you need at one time at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
Yeah, I tell everybody if you don't see what you're looking for, you're just not looking hard enough, because we've got stuff stacked in every corner, nook and cranny.
Now, you can also check out RockyMountainSports.com and check out and see what they've got and find out all the locations of all the stores.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
Drew and Brian back at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. Fishing still on fire, and I heard from a couple of guys this week that Glendo is really getting low and the boat ramp is getting really long.
Oh, yeah, and it'll get longer and longer and longer as the season goes. Although this last week, they did a silt run through Guernsey, and so they put the plug back in Glendo. It's gone up another half a foot or a foot this last week with the water that's coming into it. So there is a chance that the water is going to come up a little bit more before it goes back down.
Right, and it was at like 60-some-odd% at the 4th of July, I believe, wasn't it? Something.
Yeah, and what people have to realize is that, they draw that lake down, the winter levels usually right around that 20 to 25%. And I've seen it lower than that, but 20 to 25 seems like that's kind of the normal spot they pull it down to. Still plenty of good fishing in there. Fishing is a little bit different. They're not in the weeds. There's no weeds. All the weeds are up on shore.
Oh, yeah.
So you're fishing more of a basin and a bowl. So that, troll bite kind of kicks in, and then that vertical jig bite with jigging wraps and shiver minnows and Hutch's spoons, that kind of stuff. That bite will really start kicking in again.
So when you're out on Glendo or any Pathfinder, Alcova, and you have waypoints that you've put on your electronics, when you go out there with lower water, is it going to throw everything off? Does it throw you off? Because obviously there's not as much water to the land and different.
No. So like if you're looking at a base map of like, let's say Lake Master has contours designed on that lake. If you want that contour to match appropriately, then most fish finders will give you an offset. So you can go in and say, yeah, the water's 20 foot low or it's 20 foot high.
Okay.
And so that will adjust the depths on those contours. I've never really messed with that. I mean, I kind of contour is a contour, so it might have been at full capacity, it might have been a 20-foot contour. Now it's probably a 40-foot contour. So I don't really worry too much about that, but I do it is nice to be able to follow those contours to watch how the shore comes out. And then waypoints, I mark waypoints when water's high and when water's low. And so if I've got like a spot, where I've caught fish in September and I marked a waypoint, that waypoint's going to still be in the same spot. And I just have to kind of judge and look and see how the water level is different from the last time when I marked it.
Right, which, especially if you're marking it because there's an object there or something you could smack and ruin your prop.
Yeah, I mean, Pathfinder is a perfect example. When the water's full, Jaws is underwater, and it's no problem running your boat across the middle of the lake. But, we're coming up, to the season where that water level is going to start dropping, and, Jaws will be just inches underwater. And so if a guy doesn't have that location marked on his waypoint and on his fish finder, and usually what I tell guys is that, I've got friends that mark structure and I've got friends that mark where they catch fish. And I do a little bit of both. But when you, on a body of water like Pathfinder, and there's a underwater obstruction like Jaws out there in the middle, when that thing becomes visible, take your boat nose right up to it and put a waypoint there. Change your icon to a skull and crossbones or a danger symbol or a stop symbol, just so you know that you need to stay away from that.
Right.
But then when the water's high, it's a spot you can look at to maybe fish around.
Right. Or just stay away from it just in case, so you don't get into the mode of doing that. Right. But it's interesting how the electronics have really changed the game. When you and I were at Glendo the last time, there are so many things you can add to your boat. You can get the live scope and all this, and you can see the fish. Right. When we were younger, you had maybe a little blip here on the screen, whatever. So as much as it's changed, really, you have a $105,000 boat. You don't want a rock to take it out. No. I mean, there's been plenty of lower unit dropped on Jaws. I mean, and you just don't want to be that guy. But yeah, with the electronics, I mean, use them to your advantage. I get a lot of the older customers here says, well, I got this thing and I don't know how to use it. Well, there's some basic things that, I don't use mine for everything that it can do. Right. But, marking a waypoint to stay away from an obstruction or underwater, hazard, pretty simple to do. And, as long as you're watching the graph, you're going to save that lower unit. So we ran into a situation where we look away from the screen 1 minute and we're almost beached.
We were.
Well, I was just giving us the benefit of the doubt, but it just goes to show you that if you're not using, that technology, you could really get screwed up.
Yeah, well, we were pulling cranks up at Boise and following a shoreline, and we were just working the rods. We weren't really watching.
Yeah,
we
right.
were watching the shoreline, but there was a big point that came out, and pretty soon, we're just stopped. Planer boards are no longer moving forward, and neither were we.
Why don't I have a breeze? Gotta have a breeze.
Couldn't shut the motors off fast enough, but we didn't beach ourselves too bad. We were just trolling, but it's always an uneasy feeling about geez, what kind of damage am I going to do to stuff? And fortunately, it was sand and not big rocky boulders.
Just a split second of a wrong decision could really mess some things up. But
yeah, I mean, you just have to be aware all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're back with Brian from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports in just a few minutes as the Wyoming Hunters and Fishermen Walleye League is going, and Brian fished it this past week. We'll find out more in minutes on Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
We are back. It's Drew Kirby along with Brian Woodward of Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. Of course, you can go to RockyMountainSports.com to find out all the details of everything we can get online at the store. Again, RockyMountainSports.com. We've talked a lot about Brian being part of the Wyoming Walleye Stampede, but also here in Wyoming, we have the Wyoming Hunters and Fishermen Walleye League, which happens on Wednesday nights throughout the summer, and Jay Fountain is leading that up. And Brian, you got a chance to fish that for the first time this year at Alcova. Were there any fish caught?
Well, there was a lot of fish caught in other boats. Okay. That lake just eats me up every time I go there. We did catch 3 walleyes and a sucker. Of course, that wasn't competitive in any manner for the night, but there's a lot of good anglers fishing that. But talked to Matt Hahn last week, and there was a fish that was turned in from Alcova that had been tagged. And the last time they tagged was back in 2012.
Oh, wow.
So that fish had been in that water for 12 years. It was tagged when it was 14 and a half inches long. And he said the angler didn't measure it, but he said it was a 4 or 5 pounder. So guessing 24 to 26 inches. So
wow.
There's a lot of fish, and at the league night, there was fish from 7.5 inches to 20 inches being caught. So it looks like there's a pretty healthy amount of walleyes in that reservoir right now.
In a normal situation, if that were tagged at Glendo 12 years ago, would it be bigger than it would at Alcova?
It'd be in a frying pan already. Yeah, I mean, Glendo gets so much pressure, and the growth rate at Glendo, I think, of course, I'm not a biologist, but from listening to the Game and Fish, the growth rate at Glendo is much higher than it is at Alcova and Pathfinder, just because of the forage base.
All right.
There's just a lot more minnows and bugs and other species of critters for those walleyes to eat. At Pathfinder, they've got suckers, carp, and trout, or Twinkies as I like to refer to them. So yeah, it's a higher elevation lake. It's colder, so they just typically don't grow as fast.
It's different.
Yeah.
So the middle of August, be back at Pathfinder for the championship for the Stampede, and at that point, I mean, we're still looking a month away.
Right. Will
the fishing be that much different now than it will be then?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics with the water, so they keep Alcova at a recreational level all the way till I don't know, October 1st or September or something, late September, middle of September, and they're doing that flush on Guernsey right now. Well, they're gonna have to get Guernsey filled back up before Labor Day or whatever that next holiday is.
Right.
And that water's got to come from somewhere, and so they're either going to take it all out of Glendo, or they're going to take some out of Glendo and some out of Pathfinder and some out of Seminole. So it's hard to tell, what the Bureau of Rec's going to do with the water levels. If the water level maintains like it is, I think the fishing is just going to continue to get better and better. There's a lot of little fish in Pathfinder, but there's still plenty of good fish. I mean, and I think a lot of the anglers that have fished or do fish Pathfinder realize that catching a good quality fish out of there is tough to come by, and a lot of those 20 plus inch fish are getting put back into the lake when they're caught, which is great to see. I mean, if a guy wants to take home some fish to eat, there's plenty of 13 to 15 inch fish.
Right.
It might take a few more of those to make a meal, but at the same time, the game and fish would like to see more of those fish taken out of there, just because there's just not enough forage for those fish to get bigger, just based on the number of fish that's in there. So
really up in the air then. I mean, if we get a rainy patch where we get 2 weeks of straight rain, I mean, that'll throw a wrench in the giddy up too, won't it?
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, it all plays a part. I mean, there's a lot of parts of Pathfinder that stay pretty consistent. It's that main lake area. Has access to deep water, so you can almost always catch fish on that main lake. Of course, a lot of guys like going up on the Sweetwater Arm and pulling worm harnesses up on the sand, and of course, guys are real successful doing that as well. So, the tournament side of things always throws a different look at how guys approach a lake. And a lot of these guys, really never fish Pathfinder. Their go-to lakes, Boysen, or maybe they live at Glendo, or Glendo always fishes so well, so it's hard to, for an extra 15 minutes, why wouldn't you just drive to Glendo? But the way that these anglers will start dissecting that reservoir and the different techniques and the use of the electronics to, find fish. It was last Wednesday at Alcova. I had my Humminbird live in the water, and I haven't been using it because it's more just a hassle to put in and out, and I don't necessarily know that I think that it necessarily helps me, but we sat in one location for quite a bit of the time, and I had Greg with me, and he sat behind that screen and goes, "Oh my gosh, look, there's one over there. That's 10 feet away. It's 15 foot away. Look at that school of bait fish come through," and to see the different, how that images are, and see the direction of the fish and how they're swimming and where they're going, and whether they're suspended or whether they're coming up off the bottom or whether they're suspended and going down to the bottom.
Right.
Kind of crazy to see. So, these anglers are going to use that technology to try to dissect and break down that lake and find out if the fish are in the Sweetwater Arm, or if they're up on the river channel on the Mile, or if they're on the main lake off those big sandy points. So it's going to be interesting to see how they come across all that.
When you started fishing back when you were a kid, did you ever think that you were going to be using as much technology as a high school or college football coach to take on the next team?
I tell you, I still don't know that I even like it.
Yeah, I know.
But it does add another level of entertainment, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, the average angler, certainly doesn't need forward-facing sonar and live target and Humminbird live and all those other features, but it does kind of, it's something else to look at, and to go like, gosh, there's all these fish down here. Why aren't they biting?
Right. What can I do to make them bite my hook?
Yeah, and I tell you, so on Wednesday night, I started throwing some jerk baits at Glendo this year, and not a lot, but I know guys have been successful doing it. So, I took the time one day and pretty much fished a jerk bait exclusively, and caught, like, my first fish was 26.5 inches. So then that kind of, made a believer out of me. Yeah. And so when we were up at Alcova last week, the water is just super clear. And it's like, I don't know, I bet you could see down 15, 16 foot. It's that clear. And we were fishing this area that had a kind of a shelf that dropped, from maybe 6 foot of water down into 20 foot of water. And so I'm like, nothing else is working. I grabbed that jerk bait and I cast it up there, and then whack, I catch a 16-inch fish on it. And the jerk bait's only going down maybe 3 to 5 foot over 18 foot of water. So my only thought is that fish came out of that deep water, saw this, saw this wounded fish at the surface and just came up and whacked it. And the jerk bait's half the size of the fish. Yeah. Only one I caught on a jerkbait, but it was worth a shot.
Yeah, and it worked that time. It worked.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, the tools that you have to have in your toolbox. we always talk about, just stay simple, jigging a worm, that's fine. But then you're like, oh, it's not eating my worm, so let me go to a leech.
Right.
No, that leech isn't working today, so I'm going to go to a plastic, and now I'm going to go to a crankbait.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I think in order to be a versatile angler, you have to be diversified in your techniques, right?
Yeah.
The wind came up like crazy on Wednesday night, and we're like, man, if this wind kicks up, we can't feel our jig. Like, it's like that jig presentation's done. We're gonna probably have to go to start trolling or drifting worms or harnesses or something. But the wind fortunately died down in about 20, 30 minutes. So, but you have to be versatile, and one of my friends, I told him the other day, he's a plastic guy. That's all he does. And I go, well, you're just stubborn. I mean, there's a difference. I mean, you can catch fish or you cannot catch fish,
right.
But when the plastic bite's not working, sometimes you got to go to live bait, whether you like it or not.
Right. Well, my wife and I were watching a fishing tournament on TV, and she's like, why does that guy have 12 fishing poles laying on his boat? I was like, well, every one of those poles have a different setup so that, if it's not working, you just move on. And then you just have to go back to whatever is working. So, I mean, that's the best part of it.
Yeah, you just never know. We literally threw everything at him on Wednesday night. The jig and a worm caught me a sucker, So
well, you caught a fish,
Yeah.
Right. Wasn't a good fish or a walleye, but you caught a fish.
Yeah. But hey, we were excited to see it because we hadn't caught a fish all night. So
well, we're excited to continue hitting up the waters and be out and do some fishing before we get to hunting season, which will be here before we know it. So if you're heading out and you need to restock because you had a rough weekend on the lake, come on by and see them at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports or visit them online at RockyMountainSports.com. That's going to do it for another episode of Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors with Drew Kirby. If you have a question, want to make a comment, or have an idea for a show topic, message us on the My Country mobile app. Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.